to talk a little bit today about virality and Kabam's perspective on virality within the Facebook ecosystem. Wanted to just kick things off with a quick introduction on myself. My background is somewhat varied. I've actually held a number of different roles at different companies. The quick summary of my background, and this kind of permeates the way we do things at Kabam, is I've been on the console side, I've been on the PC side, I've been on the web side, I've been on the distribution side as well for web, as well as in game development side. Company as a whole, I think has exceptional understanding of the value chain for social games, and increasingly so for mobile. Our core competence as a business is around retention and monetization, and it's actually a push that we started in the actually I'd say the last month of 2009. And it really ties to a lot of the insights I'm going to share with you today in this presentation around virality. So a quick overview on Kabam for those of you that are not familiar with the company. We're the leading developer of hardcore games on Facebook. We've actually kind of stepped into that role silently. We try to stay out of the press as much as we can. Our lead title, Kingdoms of Camelot, was a title that launched in October of 2009. It earned the IGN Player's Choice Award in 2010. Today, we have 12.5 million monthly active users. So relative to Zynga, which obviously has hundreds of millions, we're a small company. But the size of our company, we don't measure in terms of users, we measure in terms of profitable customer acquisition. And from an employee standpoint, we have 425 employees. So because Zynga kind of sucks the air out of the room whenever they're doing stuff, it's helpful, I think, to compare ourselves to Zynga and just kind of give you a feeling for what Kabam's all about. As a company, we are populated by core gamers. I play games religiously. Our CEO, Kevin, does as well. Pretty much every member of every function is a gamer in one form or another, whether they're playing casual titles from PopCap, our own titles, or console PC titles from EA and others. And consequently, as consumers of core games, we care a great deal about producing games that we ourselves would want to play, and we target the core game audience with our products. So Kingdoms of Camelot, Glory of Rome, Dragons of Atlantis, Global Warfare, these are all titles that are designed with core gamers in mind. And for that reason, they avoid certain of the common viral best practices for casual games and are much more tailored to consequential game designs. Games based on skill as opposed to chance. And our social model is also different. Rather than relying on I think the ubiquitous practice of resource transfers or content unlocks for virality, we much more bias towards collaborative gameplay designs within persistent worlds. So we're very much about emergent gameplay. Ultimately, what this leads to is monetization type that is very deep and slow relative to Zynga. Zynga is very effective at monetizing users quickly. At least our perception of that is the case. And gameplay sessions that look a lot more like a traditional MMO. We're talking 2 to 5 hours for our most engaged users, 6 to 7 days a week. So back in 2009, when I first joined Kabam, after launching the gaming initiative at High Five, started to spend a lot of time on viral rate. Playfish, Playdom, Zynga, in 2009, we're pretty much only talking about virality. How do you take advantage of Facebook virality to grow your application very quickly? How do you push viral features to users without getting caught so that you can scale your application and gain structural advantage? And all of those companies did phenomenally well. It was definitely an appropriate strategy for that time, and what you'll see is it's not an appropriate strategy for today's market. But at the core of everything we do as a company, we use this equation to drive our decisions. We basically look at the revenue per user, we subtract out the cost per user, and then we multiply that by the number of users we've acquired, and that gets you to your profit. And when you distill those metrics down into their constituent parts or to independent variables that drive the dependent variable in the regression, you come up with, on a mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive basis, about 19 different metrics. These are debatable, just as Shanti's matrix was debatable. But this is kind of my perspective, and I'm very much a fan of less is more design. What you see here is viral rate is just one of 19 metrics. But for some reason in 2009, it became the only metric that people cared about. So viral rate, what is it? Viral rate is defined as K-factor, effectively. It's, I believe it's a concept that comes from epidemiology, but it's effectively the infection rate of a virus or a vector, in this case, an application. The science behind it was, I think, or at least in the social gaming context, the science behind it was really built out by Siki Chen and David King, who are both, I believe, well, they've gone their different ways, but really great guys, really brilliant guys. And I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but I will say, without a doubt, that virality is one of the most misunderstood concepts in social game design. The 3 points here are probably the most salient. I'm not going to get into the formula. The formula is actually, most people just use one, which is incorrect, but it's the most misunderstood concept in gaming by far. Based on the way it operates, it's actually very difficult to measure on a campaign level because you have a lot of untagged traffic via the Facebook ecosystem, and it's also difficult to optimize against. You can do it on a single generation basis, but that's not really complete. So you can spend a lot of cycles on this, but ultimately, you can't influence it, and it's complex, and it doesn't really move the needle. It's only one of 19 metrics, so I'd recommend avoiding it. The simplest way to think about virality is, if you imagine that you acquire one user here on the left, what happens with different rates of virality? When you have a K-factor over 1, you're looking at superlinear growth, and that's the green line. And that's ultimately what you want when you're building applications on a social network. I would even posit, in the case of Angry Birds, it's what you want with a consumer product in general. You want something to go viral, whether it's through an explicit Facebook channel or not. I think Angry Birds took off simply because of word of mouth, right? Obviously, it's a great product, phenomenal positioning, great art direction, et cetera. For most products, though, they tend to be sublinear propositions in that, 3 guys in the front row each tell one of their friends about it, but it doesn't propagate it. That person may not tell their next friend, may not tell the next person. To have it be superlinear growth, this gentleman here would have to tell the 2 guys behind him, you two would have to tell 2 guys behind him, and obviously then it grows to the size of the world. And for that reason, the life cycle of virality changes over the life of a product. So this is a viral application, at least the best that we can see from an external perspective. As you can see, early in the life cycle of a viral product, you have rapid growth of traffic. This is effectively when the K-factor is greater than 1. But the population size of the world is the boundary on how viral your application can be, and specifically the subset, very large subset of users on Facebook. So it goes into a K equals 1 and a K less than 1 rate. So reality is ultimately the bound on virality. So back in 2009, this is what people said. After they saw Siki and David's presentation, they said, all right, I understand virality now, I'm going to go do it. And the fact of the matter is, it's not that easy. So I'd like to introduce the black box of virality. And this is ultimately the thinking that drove our decision to stop doing viral development back in 2009. So on the left here, you have a player who's already playing your game. And that person is going to your game and sending out invites, requests, and wall posts to their social graph, to their friends. Each of those messages goes into the Facebook black box. And basically, if you think about the way Facebook operates, these guys manage an enormous amount of data, right? And they've got users that are time slicing engagement with the product. I check it from my mobile device, I check it from my work PC, I check it from home. Each time I'm looking for different types of information, I have a different reason for being there. What they're trying to do is, based on these thousands of messages you could potentially receive in any given day, at any given moment, present you with the best content possible. And ultimately, their definition for success as a social network is presenting highly relevant content. So what that means is, if I go into a Zynga game, I send out 50 requests, I send out 50 invites, I send out 100 wall posts, which would be hard to do. It has to go into a black box. It has to be filtered. It has to be sorted for relevance, and it has to be presented to the people that only care about it. You have no control over that. And so how can you break apart that black box? There was a lot of thought put into this in 2010. How do you understand virality? How do you do what CrowdStrike did and break the platform? Fact of the matter is, it's impossible to tell what's in the box. There could be kittens, right? And don't worry, for those of you that are familiar with Schrodinger's, I opened the box to make sure they were alive before putting together this presentation. Could be Google engineers. That's probable, actually. But ultimately, it doesn't matter, because you can't control it. Facebook is going to do what they need to do, as is true for any game developer. You wouldn't want someone coming to you and saying, hey, change your leveling curve. You know, you've got to define a game design that makes sense for the audience that you're trying to address. Because you can't control it, from our perspective, we don't invest any time on it. So here's my Facebook profile page. These wall posts from the Zynga games are authentic. I did them. I love their products. I think they do good stuff. But this is ultimately not a good experience for the average Facebook user, right? My mom doesn't want to see that I need help leveling up in Empires and Allies. She doesn't really care. Likewise, if I catch her playing it, then I'm going to get pretty angry. So they've done the right thing by clamping down on virality. It's the right thing to do for a social network. It's not, although it is one of the most important social game distribution platforms, if not the most important, it's not their primary use case. You know, Facebook is about photos, it's about information sharing, it's about gaming. So, never seen before data. I don't think I've ever seen a company publish their K-factor, but this is the K-factor for Kingdoms of Camelot. And what you can clearly see on this graph is step function changes to our K-factor over time. It's very telling. So in the background, you have to imagine we had a full team working on this product, trying to keep the K-factor up as much as we could without over-investing in the functionality, because to really do it right, you have to tie it to the systems design of the game. And on the side, Facebook is effectively changing the way that their platform operates. And every time that the viral rate drops, you're basically having to pay for more users to maintain the same influx of traffic. And so this is the consequence of having something outside of your control. A lot of companies chase this down, and we basically didn't spend any time on it. So the truth about Virality today, this is basically the way it works. New users come into your application from the ad system. They become, if your game is good, if they like the game, if it's relevant to what they want to do, they become gamers for the product, like player one. All the players in your game, they basically send out invites, requests, and wall posts to the black box. But because of the enhanced targeting capabilities of Facebook, they pretty much ensure that those messages only go to people that are already playing games on the network. So out of the 750 that they've got, 750 million users that they have hitting the application, a subset of them are gamers, purportedly. I've heard different numbers, but half of the web traffic, not the mobile traffic. And those are the guys that are coming back to the app. So to really go viral is near impossible these days. So just to kind of really prove the point, here's a product that we acquired, which was a purely viral application. It had no marketing support. It was low revenue per DAU, daily active user product. In other words, it was a product that we could not buy traffic against to scale. And as you can see with this graph, explosive superlinear growth earlier in the life cycle of the product, coupled by the requisite shift to K=1, which is basically not visible, and then an immediate decline because it's sublinear. And at the end of the day, this points to the key point with social game development today, which is your game has to be profitable on a per-user basis for you to scale the product. It's a very different perspective on the way that you build games for Facebook. And what it implicitly means is that the early days of Facebook development, where a web product manager could basically hack their way into a game, which I remember when I was at Casual Connect in the early days of social games, a lot of people kind of looked down on the industry because the game design principles were more crude. And frankly, that was true, because a lot of the people that were building games at that time were not game developers. They hadn't done it as a trade or as a profession. Those days are gone. And what you see at Zynga, what you see at Playdom, what you see at Kabam is a much heavier emphasis on engagement, retention, on game design, on product quality, and ultimately making people stick within your product. So every company should optimize their business differently. There are 18 factors remaining that you can chase. We focus on the red ones here: retention rate, paying user percentage, transactions per user, average sale price, and campaign effectiveness. I've kind of truncated the complexity that goes into campaign effectiveness because of the audience. I think most of the folks here are probably on the product development side. These metrics are very high level. And frankly, to really do these metrics right, you have to have an even deeper understanding of your product. and a really strong BI system, business intelligence system, to track the data, store the data, and allow you to analyze it quickly. But let me just walk through these at a high level and share some high-level insights with what we do as a company. This is stuff that, again, we've been doing for 2 years now. So with retention, this is perhaps the most important, I would say. It's easy, I think, in the context of Facebook credits and with rising ad rates to get focused on the monetization side of things. But that is really ultimately going to polish what is already there. And retention rate, in my opinion, is a proxy for how good your game is. There's a very strong correlation between quality review scores and how many users stick in your application. Although I don't like the term because it's oftentimes manipulated by ad spend. The stickiness, basically the DAUs over MAUs of an application, are very much indicative of how good or how high quality the product is. And from our perspective, the retention rate is earned. So that starts with the first-time experience. When you come into the application, it needs to be familiar, it needs to be easy to navigate, and it needs to be compelling. And our earlier efforts in this regard were not super polished. I think we've stepped up our game substantially. We have a title in beta now that is, I think, perhaps one of our most refined. But easy to pick up user interface is key. And it's an interesting one, right? I'd be kind of curious on people's perspective here on this. So how many people play console first-person shooters? All right, cool. How many people get upset when the standard configuration for control on those first-person shooters is changed for arbitrary reasons? Yeah, exactly, close to 100%. Same thing with user interface design in web products. And it's the principal reason I believe that Zynga doesn't change their UI layout that much, and why the industry as a whole has migrated towards a pretty similar composition of the page. Ultimately, you want to just get to the fun as quickly as you can. If you have to fight your way through user interface to get there, then that's a fail. Second point is really important, and this points to the game design aspect of the business. The core gameplay loop of these products has to be super tight and it has to be addictive. And it needs to be extendable in order for you to maintain a long-term relationship with your customer. Retention rewards, I think this is something that, I actually think Playdom might have pioneered this, Playfish potentially. But basically giving people a reason to come back outside of I'm gifting you energy or anything like that. A login bonus or a gift that you get after a certain expiration of time, which is more the Asian best practice for these games. Incredibly effective. Social features and functionality. I've put this back in because although viral rate is not something you can optimize for, some users and subgroups of users do prefer the social interaction. You know, it tends to be people in their 20s, tends to be teenagers, people that are more price sensitive. They're less willing to pay for your products. They're much more willing to grind it out because they have the time to grind it out. And to kind of appeal to their contemporary taste, you have to offer some modicum of support. And then the last one is really important. Oftentimes, people don't understand how important it is to keep your application stable under scale and under load. And you can't underinvest in that, honestly. Monetization. So I've taken the 3 monetization metrics and kind of rolled it up into one. This is a real science. I think it is perhaps alien to traditional game development, but it is certainly a native concept to web developers and web product managers in particular. There's only a certain amount of pixels you have on the screen at any given time. There's only a certain number of messages that you can deliver to the customer before they feel overwhelmed, like this is a spammy product or this is no longer a game. And so being able to present to the user behaviorally targeted information, that's something that we invest a great deal of time and effort in. That's why we have a 20-person BI team. We basically ensure that based on your gameplay preferences, you're going to see what you want. And then the first point again shows up, and this is why retention and monetization is really ultimately driven by the game design, and ironically by a very strong quantitative approach to systems design. Game has to be good. If it's not good, you're not going to pay for it. Third bullet, behaviorally targeting game promotions, touched on that. Second bullet, limited duration items and promotions. I would say this is one area where we're not doing as well. You see an example of it here on the right with the save 10% on stone in global warfare. This is something that actually requires a great deal of discipline, and it's somewhat antithetical to traditional web notions of automating everything, because ultimately it should be responsive to what you're doing within the game and what you're trying to achieve over the life cycle of a product. But it is effective. I mean, if you look at how quickly Zynga puts out content, I mean, immediately post the launch of Empires and Allies, they were pushing content constantly. That's best practice. That's what people want. Not doing stuff like that is equivalent to showing reruns of old sitcoms. And white glove customer support, this is another area where we differentiate ourselves. We believe very strongly in providing high levels of support for our users, obviously within the bounds of reason. But we do want our customers to walk away with it from every interaction that we have with them, holding Kabam in high regard. We track customer satisfaction with our service and with our customer support. It's very important to us. And then again, application stability. On the last point, marketing efficiency, less my forte, but one of the most important aspects of how you scale a product is basically how inexpensively you can acquire quality traffic. And it comes down, in my opinion, to three very simple high-level bullets. The quality of the creative and copy, and that obviously needs to be localized in an increasingly global market for social games. It requires a great deal of discipline. The Facebook ad system is come a long way, but the service as a whole is much younger than, say, like Google AdWords. And their product roadmap is incredibly deep. Stuff that they want to build to make the lives of online marketers easier, there's a ton of it. So here, a lot of the work can be manual at times, but it is incredibly important because every dollar you spend is hopefully going to translate into a dollar of return. And then sophisticated segment targeting. I think our online marketing team does a fantastic job of this, but really getting disciplined about which customers you want to pursue, when, at a given stage in the product lifecycle, and then delivering to them basically a value proposition that's consistent. And as we move forward, bringing that messaging into the game. So just to kind of wrap that all up, from our perspective, and I think it'd be the consensus that everyone shares, Virality, for all intents and purposes, is dead on Facebook. The way that Black Box operates today does not allow for super linear growth for any prolonged period of time. To find the exploit in the system is incredibly costly, and it will necessarily eat into your ability to build a great product. And so the best thing to do is focus on profitable customer acquisition and building incredibly great games. And that's what we've been working on for the last 2 years. And in that context, driving marketing retention and monetization efficiency as much as you can. Thanks for the time. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Since Virality seems to be easier on the mobile platforms, do you see any crossover occurring where mobile games are being launched with Facebook connectivity to drive Facebook adoption on Facebook?
Yeah, definitely. We're bullish on everything that Facebook is doing on mobile. It's where they've seen a lot of traffic growth. We're a little bit early on in our mobile game development stage. We've got 2 products in development right now. We've spun up a dedicated team around the time of our last fundraise, which I'm very excited about. I'm very bullish on mobile. As Shanti mentioned, I do think it's an accretive platform that's in an earlier stage of its life cycle. I do think that sharing functionality is important, but I think the most powerful viral tool for mobile is being able to show you the game. I know firsthand that's sold multiple copies of Angry Birds. So, did I get your question?
What I'm saying is that rather than going out and spending a fortune on trying to promote a Facebook title,
Yes.
if you have a Facebook title and you have a mobile title, they share the same connectivity and functionality.
Yes.
It's cheaper, I know for a fact, to basically promote a mobile title in high numbers.
Yes. Gotcha now. I see what you're saying. So what he's basically asking is, do you see value in you creating a cross-platform title and then using basically arbitraging the fact that ad rates are lower on mobile to build brand awareness and a meaningful user base on the mobile and web product and have them coexist? Actually, I do think that's a very interesting idea. For us, like our first generation of products are not Flash products. They're HTML, JavaScript products. And so people do play them on mobile devices. They play them quite a lot, actually. It's always funny because people will lament when they are no longer able to get to it on their Android or iOS device. But it's kind of interesting. The the complexities of building a Flash product for mobile and Flash concurrently are pretty heavy. But that's my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. Yes, sir.
Tim Merrill, DigiCapital, we're a games investment bank. We're investing in an iPhone and Android game company at the moment. One of the things we like about them is they use viral video with cutscenes, comic cutscenes, to get hundreds of thousands or millions of people to actually see what they're doing. And it builds the brand, but it also really lowers the marketing cost. What do you think about that sort of thing?
Oh, that's a cool idea. Tim was basically saying that he's representing a company or working with a company that uses viral videos inside of a mobile application for Android and iOS to basically broadcast out that the game is good, give people a chance to share their memorable moments. I'm definitely a fan of that. We've been actually investing in some recent, against our new beta product, we've been investing in the ability to capture, animate streams of a fight effectively and be able to share that out. Ultimately, that's what you want, right? You want to be able to share your highlight reel with customers. If we were playing basketball and you dunked on me, I'm sure you'd want to send me a nice video of you hanging on the rim. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I can see that being very effective. Any other questions?
I've noticed a tendency, especially in new Facebook developers, to talk about Facebook messaging and virality and viral systems as the same thing. Obviously, you guys use Facebook messaging channels to communicate, to allow communication between players and to communicate with players. What's the value of those channels? Not virality.
So Facebook messaging channels, good question. There's player versus player social on Facebook, and then there's also developer versus player. We invest a lot of time. We actually have a pretty large, for a social game company, we have a very large community management organization that puts a great deal of effort into our game pages. And hopefully this addresses your question on what's the difference between viral channels and messaging channels on Facebook. So we'll have a community manager that takes an event, let's say like the introduction of a new city or the introduction of a new dragon in Dragons of Atlantis, and they basically take it to market the way that a product marketer would in a retail context. We build awareness, consideration, preference for the content release. We do it on multiple channels. We involve the customers in that dialogue. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. That's kind of the consequence of Facebook channels. You can't control what people say. But at the end of the day, if you approach it with an objective mind and kind of internalize their feedback, whether it's positive or negative, you can actually continue to make your product better. So from a developer to customer standpoint, we rely on it heavily. We do through their messaging channels, and then we also take the relationship onto our own side with lifecycle marketing, like email marketing effectively, and we'll do that as well. And then within the applications, it's mostly requests, wall posts, and invites. Those are player-initiated channels of dialogue or communication. Also, we find that users do a lot of Facebook chat, so their IM client, and also email message delivery. But what you can start to see there is there's actually a lot of complexity. There are a lot of channels. So for smaller developers, I definitely counsel that you focus on the channels that really matter the most for player-to-player virality. And so in large part, those are the three that I presented here. There are actually a couple more that you could use. And then for direct relationship, yeah, we've definitely found that managing a decent page, keeping the dialogue going, that's important as well. Any last questions? All right, that's it. Thank you very much.